Have you ever felt like something was off in your own home, like your gut was telling you a thief was hiding in plain sight? That's exactly how it started for me. At first, it was nothing more than a flicker. The lights dimmed, not enough to panic over, but just enough to make me pause. My battery bank, which usually held steady through the night, began draining much faster than normal. My inverter logs, which I checked religiously because I built and paid for every inch of that solar setup, showed strange dips. It was like my system had sprung a leak. I told myself it had to be a glitch. Maybe one of the lithium cells in the battery pack was going bad. Maybe the inverter was misreading load. Even electricians sometimes shrug at phantom drains. But I knew my system. I had spent weekends on rooftops, bolting panels into place. I had run the wiring with my own hands, tested every fuse, checked every breaker. I knew the hum of my system like some people know the sound of their own car engines. And this wasn't right. It got worse. My power bill, which was supposed to go down because of the solar, started creeping up. Just a few dollars at first. Then more. And more. Every month I paid the utility company while staring at those numbers, thinking, this doesn't make sense. The panels were producing. The batteries were storing. The app was showing me production that should have covered my needs. But my reserves? They were draining like a bucket with a hole punched in the bottom. That's when suspicion sank its teeth in. I started checking usage at odd hours. Midnight. 2 a.m. 3 a.m. Always the same pattern, sudden spikes, small but sharp, like someone had flipped a switch when they thought no one was looking. The logs didn't lie. Someone, or something, was drawing power when the house was asleep. It would have been easier to dismiss if it happened once. But it happened night after night, always at nearly the same time, always enough to dent my reserves. And here's the part that really made my blood boil, this wasn't just about money. Sure, the stolen electricity added up to dollars out of my pocket, but it was also about safety. I had invested in that system to protect my family. During storms or outages, we relied on backup power. Medicine stayed cold in the fridge. Emergency lights kept us safe. If my reserves were drained because someone else was leeching my power, that safety net disappeared. So I started asking myself questions no homeowner should have to ask. Who could it be? Was it some random neighbor sneaking over at night with an extension cord? Was it a contractor tapping into a line they thought no one would notice? Or was it something worse, someone with authority, someone who thought rules didn't apply to them? The thought burned in my chest. I tested everything I could test. Ran diagnostics on the inverter. Checked the battery health reports. Even called a buddy of mine who works in electrical maintenance just to get a second opinion. Every single test came back clean. No faults. No hidden malfunctions. My system was fine. Which meant only one thing, the problem wasn't inside my home. It was outside. Someone was stealing from me. That realization hit hard. This wasn't just a technical mystery, it was theft, plain and simple. Theft happening right under my nose, under the cover of night, with me footing the bill. That night, as I sat in the dark with a mug of coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the blinking lights on my inverter, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just shrug this off. I wasn't going to let it slide. I was going to catch whoever was stealing my power. And when I did, they weren't just going to face me. They were going to face the law. The first night I decided to stay awake, I sat near the window in my living room with nothing but a notebook, my phone, and a pot of coffee. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start hearing your own heartbeat. I had turned off every unnecessary light, every appliance, so that even the smallest spike in energy would stand out. Around midnight, the numbers on my inverter app dipped again, just like before. A power draw, sudden and deliberate. My grip tightened on the phone. The logs didn't lie. Whoever it was, they were at it again. I slipped outside, barefoot on the cool concrete, careful not to make a sound. The night air was heavy, and the neighborhood slept in darkness, except for one faint glow in the distance. At first, I thought it was a streetlight. But as I moved closer, I realized it wasn't. It was headlights, dim, muted, and the soft hum of a vehicle charging. My heart pounded as I ducked behind a hedge and peered across the cul-de-sac. There it was. My suspicion turned into rage in a matter of seconds. A sleek black Tesla sat parked at the side of my property, plugged directly into one of my exterior outlets. The heavy-duty charging cable gleamed under the moonlight. And leaning casually against the hood, as if he owned the place, was a man I recognized immediately, Officer Clay. Clay wasn't just any neighbor. He was the HOA's so-called security officer. A cop who thought his badge gave him immunity from basic decency. He had been strutting around our neighborhood for months, writing up citations for trash cans left out too long, barking at kids for riding bikes on the sidewalk, even threatening fines for unapproved paint colors. Everyone hated him, but nobody dared to push back because he wore a uniform and carried authority like a weapon. And now here he was, stealing power from my grid to juice up his luxury toy. The audacity of it nearly knocked the breath out of me. This wasn't some desperate neighbor trying to keep their fridge running. This was a man with a six-figure car, leeching off my hard-earned investment because he thought he could. I stood there, fists clenched, torn between storming out and ripping the cord from the socket, or quietly watching, documenting, building a case. My rational side won, barely. I snapped a photo with my phone, making sure the Tesla logo and the charging cable were both clear. Then I took another of the outlet, the cable, even the power meter spinning faster than it should. Evidence. But as I watched, the anger grew into something darker. He wasn't just stealing electricity. He was putting my family at risk. Every kilowatt he drained was a kilowatt I couldn't use in an emergency. Every spike shortened the life of my batteries, increased my bills, and undermined the system I had worked months to build. And the smug look on his face as he scrolled his phone while his car fed off my power? That was the part one couldn't forgive. He wasn't sneaky. He wasn't ashamed. He was arrogant, like this was his right, like I should be grateful he chose my grid. That night, I didn't confront him. I let him finish, watched him unplug casually, roll up his cord, and drive off into the darkness. But as his taillights disappeared, a plan began to form in my mind. Clay thought I was just another quiet homeowner who would never stand up to him. He thought his badge and his position with the HOA made him untouchable. But he had made one fatal mistake: he underestimated me. I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to teach him a lesson he would never forget. And it all started with one simple thought: if he wants to plug into my solar grid, then I control the current. After the night with the Tesla and Officer Clay, sleep stopped being a given. My mind ran rewrites of the encounter on a loop: the cable plugged into my outlet, the casual way he leaned against his car, the calm indifference as he drained what I paid for. For a few days I let the anger simmer, because anger without direction is just noise. I needed a plan, not a prank, not a rush to violence, but an airtight way to prove what was happening and to force the law to act. Step 1 was eliminating every other possibility. I called an old friend who works in electrical maintenance and had him come by during the day. We checked inverter logs together, inspected the battery cells, verified the grounding and breakers. Everything in the system read clean, no phantom faults, no mysterious internal draws. If the system was healthy and production matched expected output, then there was only one explanation left: an external draw. Someone was connecting to my setup without permission. Step 2 was about evidence. I knew stories like this died in the gray area of he said, she said, unless there were hard numbers. So I invested in proof I could carry into a filing cabinet and into a courtroom: a compact, tamper-resistant submeter that could record timestamped kilowatt hours, and a small, weatherproof camera with a cloud backup feature. I mounted the camera in a discreet location with a clear view of the outlet and driveway. The meter was installed inline on the exterior circuit that fed that outlet. No theatrics, no traps, just logs and footage. Setting up the equipment took patience. I positioned the camera so it wouldn't be easily noticed but would still capture license plates, faces, and exact plug times. The sub-meter synced to a phone app that archived readings to the cloud, and I enabled alerts to ping me when the outlet drew power. Now, instead of guessing, I would have time-synced video and power data that matched second for second. While the tech did its job, I researched the law. I read county codes and utility regulations and called the county energy office to ask hypotheticals. If someone taps a private solar outlet without permission, who's liable? The answer was straightforward. Unauthorized draw from private utility infrastructure is treated as theft of services in our jurisdiction. Trespass laws could also apply if someone accessed private property to do it. Hearing that formal confirmation calmed the corner of my brain that worries about what if no one will believe me. The law was on my side, if I had the proof. I also spoke to neighbors, not to gossip but to ask questions. A few admitted they'd noticed Clay's attitude, power trips, rule enforcement that bent reality. One neighbor mentioned she'd seen him park by different houses late at night with his vest on, always under the guise of community security. That painted a pattern. This wasn't an isolated bad actor, it was someone abusing perceived authority. By the time the equipment was fully synced and cloud backups verified, I felt ready. I set minimal rules for myself: don't provoke, don't retaliate, don't do anything that could get me charged. The goal was simple and legal: document, report, and let the authorities handle it. That restraint would be harder than it sounded. Every time I saw Clay walk past my house with that chest-out swagger, my hands clenched. But I kept reminding myself, evidence first, justice second. On the third night after installation, my phone buzzed at 12:14 a.m., an alert I'd been waiting for. The sub-meter registered a draw on the exterior outlet. The camera had already started recording. Heart pounding, I opened the cloud feed and watched the clip in real time: headlights, a silhouette, the heavy-duty cable uncoiled, and the unmistakable logo on the car's nose. Clay's figure leaned, plugged, and settled as if nothing untoward was happening. I hit record on my phone, but the real recording was already happening, the meter logging kilowatt-hour, the timestamp footage backing up to the cloud. Instead of rushing outside or trying to confront him mid-charge, I did something more powerful. I called the county energy office and the sheriff's non-emergency line, told them what I had, and provided access to the live feed so they could see exactly what was happening. That night, for the first time in weeks, I sat back and watched the situation unfold with a sense of control. I had taken chaotic suspicion and turned it into a methodical, lawful plan. If Clay thought he could keep taking what wasn't his, he was about to find out what happens when a homeowner documents everything and lets the system, legal and technological, do the rest. The third night after I installed the meter and camera, everything felt different. It wasn't just that I had tech that could prove the theft, it was the quiet presence of preparedness. Preparedness has a weight to it, it sits heavy and calm in your chest. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, dimmed all the lights, and settled into my usual spot by the blinds with my phone in hand. The app was open, the cloud feed queued, and my finger hovered over the record button even though the system was already recording. Midnight came and went. The app was mostly quiet, a soft glow on the screen like a sleeping animal. At 12:14 a.m., the alert chimed: exterior outlet active. My heart did that weird jump you don't notice until after it happens. I muted every other notification and stared at the feed. The camera captured a lot more than I expected. At first it was just headlights, then wheels slowing, then the silhouette of a car easing into the street. The angle was perfect. You could make out the Tesla badge on the grille and the long, expensive cable coiled over the trunk. I felt anger, but it was measured. A lens of focus had replaced the instinct to shout and charge outside. A figure stepped out, hands on the hips like he owned the night. Even in partial light, the vest was obvious, a tactical-style garment with the letters HOA across the back. It was Officer Clay. My blood went cold with recognition and heat at the same time, recognition because I'd seen his swagger around the neighborhood a dozen times, heat because he stood there, in my driveway, helping himself to something I bought and maintained. He walked straight to the outlet, uncoiled the cable, and plugged in. The sub-meter's live readout jumped like a heartbeat: instant draw, exactly the kind of spike that had tormented my logs for weeks. The footage showed the timestamp in the corner, 12:16 a.m. The meter logged the flow in kilowatt-hours, second by second. The cloud backed up both video and numbers without human interference. This was the definition of corroboration, sight and measurement in one file. He lingered, leaning against the hood as if he were waiting for applause. He scrolled on his phone, drank from a bottle, and smiled like it was nothing. That smile, the casual arrogance of it, did more to provoke me than the act itself. I took more photos, close-ups of the plug, a wider frame showing his vest and the Tesla emblem, a screenshot of the meter app synced to the cloud. Each photo had the timestamp burned into it by the recording system. Each one clicked into the folder I'd prepared for authorities. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't snatch the cable or call him names. I watched and recorded because at that moment, documentation felt like a shield. Anyone can claim innocence in a shouting match, but video and meter readings don't argue, they speak. I wanted the clearest possible case. While he charged, I felt a million small things rushing back, how I'd walked rooftops tightening panel mounts, how I'd stayed late nights wiring this system to keep my family safe during storms. All those hours, all that money, being leached by a man who treated civic service as a costume. The moral outrage was a steady pulse under my skin. At 12:40 a.m. the car's indicator still glowed. The meter had logged a decent chunk of energy. He unplugged with a nonchalant flick, coiled the cable as if nothing had happened, and drove off with the same smooth silence Teslas have when they slip into the night. By the time his taillights vanished, my hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline, from the high-stakes calm of having proof. I uploaded the raw footage to 2 separate cloud backups and sent an annotated clip to the county energy office, the sheriff's non-emergency line, and a trusted neighbor who'd agreed to be a witness if needed. I included the exact times, the kilowatt-hour usage during the session, and a note, unauthorized draw from private solar outlet. Camera and meter footage attached. Sending it felt like throwing a rope into a current. Once they pulled, things would move. There's a different kind of triumph that comes not from confrontation but from control. In that moment, I felt more in control than during any heated argument. I had turned a creeping suspicion into an irrefutable timeline. The image of Clay, vest on, cable in hand, timestamp in the corner, those frames would be hard to explain away. I closed the feed, left the lights off, and let the house breathe. The coffee had gone cold. Sleep was impossible, but it didn't matter. I'd captured exactly what I needed. Now the next step, letting the legal system do the rest, was out of my hands, and I was okay with that. The stakes were higher than pride. This was about property, safety, and accountability. And for the first time in weeks, those stakes felt manageable. Beyond the blinds, the neighborhood slept. Inside, I sat with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd finally turned suspicion into proof. Morning light carries a strange kind of courage. Maybe it's the way shadows fade, or how silence is replaced with the noise of ordinary life. That morning, I had more than courage, I had evidence. Hours of footage, clean meter logs, and screenshots stacked like dominoes ready to fall. I wasn't going to wait for another midnight theft. It was time to face him, in daylight, where masks and shadows couldn't protect him. I spotted Officer Clay before he spotted me. He was strutting down the street in his usual uniform, tactical vest with HOA cop patches stitched on like badges of honor, mirrored sunglasses, a walkie clipped to his chest, and the kind of swagger you'd expect from someone with real authority. Only he wasn't law, not even close. He was a volunteer with a title no one had voted for, and yet he carried himself like he had jurisdiction over the block. I stepped off my porch, phone in hand, camera app open. My heart was hammering, but not from fear, from the anticipation of finally saying out loud what I'd been holding in. He turned as I approached, chin tilted high, smirk already forming like he was ready to issue me a citation for existing. "Morning," I said flatly. He tipped his sunglasses. "Something wrong with your property?" His tone dripped with fake professionalism. "Yeah," I said, stopping a few feet away. My property's been feeding your Tesla. The smirk froze for a second before he masked it. Excuse me? I raised my phone just enough so the camera lens caught the sunlight. I've got footage. Multiple nights. You, in that vest, plugging your car into my solar grid. The meter logs, the video, all of it. You've been stealing electricity from me. He leaned back, adjusting his vest, and chuckled like I was the one telling jokes. Neighborhood ordinance allows emergency charging. I'm authorized to draw from community resources when needed. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I almost laughed in his face, but anger kept my voice sharp. Community resources? My panels, my inverter, my outlet, all bought and paid for by me. Nothing about my solar array is community. You don't have permission. That makes it theft. And last night? It's all on camera. His smirk turned into a sneer. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't want to push this. Interfering with HOA authority carries consequences. That was the line that nearly broke me. Authority? HOA authority? He was a guy in a vest, not a deputy. My hand shook as I tilted my phone so he could see the red recording dot blinking. You're not an officer. You're not HOA law. And right now, you're admitting, on camera, to stealing utilities. That's a criminal offense. For the first time since I'd known him, his confidence cracked. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darted behind me, scanning the street like he expected backup. He muttered, "You can't prove intent." I swiped my phone and pulled up the app. The footage from last night played in real time, his Tesla rolling up, his figure walking across my driveway, the exact moment he plugged in. The timestamp glowed in the corner, synced with the meter log I flashed next. This isn't intent, I said, voice calm now. This is action. Documented. Timestamped. Backed up. Sent to the sheriff's office already. His face drained of color. He tried to recover, straightening his vest. This is harassment. You're targeting an HOA officer. You mean a trespasser with a badge patch he bought online? I snapped back. You're not above the law. Not in this neighborhood. Not on my property. For a beat, we just stood there, him bristling, me holding steady. Then, like clockwork, his phone buzzed. He yanked it out, muttered something, and within 10 minutes Karen, the HOA president herself, rolled up in her shiny SUV. He must have called her for backup, as if HOA rules would outweigh property rights. Karen stormed toward us, voice shrill before her heels even hit the pavement. This is harassment. You can't tamper with a member's vehicle. He was conducting official HOA business. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Official business? Plugging his Tesla into my solar grid without permission? She crossed her arms, smug and unbothered. The HOA has rights to community resources, and that includes private property if deemed necessary. That line almost made me laugh out loud. The stupidity was so bold it bordered on comedy. I didn't argue. I didn't have to. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from the sheriff's office confirming receipt of the evidence I'd sent. Help was already on the way. Standing there, with Karen on one side and Clay on the other, I realized something. This wasn't just about electricity anymore. It was about entitlement, abuse of fake authority, and people who thought rules bent around them. And I was done bending. That was the moment I stopped being the quiet homeowner watching from the blinds. That was the moment I became the one writing the rules, backed not by an HOA patch, but by law, evidence, and a refusal to be bullied. The standoff in my driveway felt like a bad play. Clay, chest puffed out in his fake vest, Karen crossing her arms with that smug look like she was queen of the cul-de-sac, and me standing between them with my phone still recording. The tension was thick, but I wasn't worried. I knew what was coming. Right on cue, a pair of squad cars rolled up the street, their headlights cutting through the morning haze. Blue and red lights flickered against the houses, reflecting off Clay's shiny Tesla still parked halfway in my driveway. For once, he didn't look so confident. His smirk had melted into something tighter, the look of a man suddenly realizing the costume doesn't mean much when the real uniforms show up. Two deputies stepped out, calm but alert. Hands rested near their belts, scanning the scene. One of them called out, "We got a report of theft of services and trespassing. Who's the homeowner here?" I raised my hand. "That'd be me." Clay sprang forward before I could say more. "He sabotaged my car. He's been harassing me, interfering with my duties as HOA security. He jabbed a finger at me like a kid on the playground." "Arrest him, now!" Karen chimed in, shrill and loud. "Yes, officer, this is harassment. He tampered with an HOA member's vehicle while he was conducting official business. You can't just let that slide." The deputies didn't flinch. They turned to me. "Sir, what's your side of the story?" I kept it simple. "He's been plugging his Tesla into my solar outlet at night. I installed a submeter and camera. I've got video, timestamps, and usage logs proving it. I sent all of it to your office before you got here." I held up my phone. "You can see it right now if you want." The deputy nodded. "Let's take a look." I opened the footage, Clay creeping across my driveway at 12:16 a.m., plugging in his car, leaning on the hood like he owned it. The submeter data matched perfectly, showing the exact power draw. The deputies watched in silence, their expressions neutral but firm. When the clip ended, one of them looked straight at Clay. "That's unauthorized use of private utilities. That's theft of services. And since this is his property, stepping on it without consent is trespassing." Clay's face turned beet red. No, you don't understand. I'm HOA enforcement. Neighborhood ordinance allows me access. This is emergency charging." The deputy didn't even blink. "Sir, HOA rules don't override state law. They don't override property rights. You can't walk onto someone's land and use their equipment without permission. That's illegal. Period." Karen tried to bulldoze her way in again. "This is outrageous. The HOA has rights to community resources, and as president, I—" The deputy cut her off, voice sharp. "Ma'am, you're not above the law. HOA bylaws don't supersede state code. And interfering in a theft investigation? That's obstruction." Her jaw dropped. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. She opened her mouth to argue again, then thought better of it when the second deputy pulled out a citation pad. By now, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered. Curtains twitched, people leaned on fences, a couple even pulled out phones to record. The HOA cop and his queen bee president, cornered by real officers in broad daylight, it was the kind of spectacle no one wanted to miss. The deputies wrote Clay up for theft of services and trespassing. Karen was cited for obstruction after trying to argue her way into immunity. Clay's Tesla, still parked dead in my driveway after its charging port had sparked the night before, sat like a monument to his arrogance. As the deputies escorted them toward the squad cars, Clay shot me a look, half fury, half humiliation. Karen hissed, "This isn't over," though it sounded weaker than she probably intended. I didn't bother replying. I just lifted my coffee mug, still warm in my hand, and gave them a small, satisfied nod. The neighborhood watched silently as the self-proclaimed enforcers were driven away in the back of real police cruisers. For the first time in weeks, the air on the street felt lighter. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the finale. Not yet. HOA types don't back down easy, not when their pride's been bruised in front of everyone. I had won the battle, but the war, the fallout, the court case, the reckoning, was still waiting ahead. And I was ready for it. The morning after the deputies hauled Clay and Karen away, the neighborhood buzzed like a kicked beehive. People who had avoided eye contact with me for months now stopped on the sidewalk, asking what happened. Some whispered in hushed tones, others laughed behind cupped hands, But the story spread faster than wildfire. The HOA cop got busted for stealing power. I didn't bask in it, not yet. Because I knew, as sure as the sun would rise, that Clay and Karen wouldn't just slink off quietly. Pride was their fuel, and humiliation only made them burn hotter. Sure enough, the first sign came 2 days later. A letter, stamped with the HOA seal, shoved into my mailbox. The wording was predictable: accusations of harassment, tampering with HOA property, as if his Tesla belonged to the community, and a demand that I pay a fine for interfering with HOA business. I almost laughed right there on the porch. They were doubling down. But here's the thing about doubling down: it works only when you hold the cards. And I had all of them. I already had the deputy's citations. I had the video. I had the meter logs. And more importantly, I had spoken to a county attorney the very morning after the arrest. Theft of services isn't just a slap on the wrist. When you calculate the dollar value of stolen electricity, and in this case, it wasn't pocket change, it was weeks of nightly charging a luxury EV, it stacks up fast. Add trespassing to the pile, and suddenly Clay's bravado looked like liability. So, I filed a civil suit against Clay for theft of services, seeking damages equal to every kilowatt he'd siphoned, plus punitive damages. My lawyer almost grinned reading through the file I'd compiled. "This is airtight," she said. "He won't just lose. He'll pay for thinking he was untouchable." Karen didn't escape my sights either. Her obstruction charge was minor compared to Clay's theft, but it painted her as complicit. And when the county began sniffing around HOA records, sparked by my complaint and the deputy's report, things got uglier for her. Turns out, she'd been bending rules for years: unapproved fees, bogus citations, and expenses that didn't add up. Neighbors who had been afraid to speak finally came forward, and the county opened a full investigation into the HOA's charter. While all this churned in the background, Clay tried to play the tough guy. He walked around the block after his citation like nothing happened, vest zipped up, sunglasses polished. But the swagger didn't land the same. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. Kids pointed and whispered. The man who once strutted like a sheriff now looked like a mall cop with a record. The lawsuit hearings began a few weeks later. Courtrooms have a way of stripping arrogance down to size. Clay showed up in a cheap suit, trying to look professional, but the evidence shredded any pretense. My attorney rolled the footage on a projector, him plugging in at 12:16 a.m., the Tesla charging, the meter logging power. Time-stamped. Synced. Irrefutable. When the judge asked him to explain, his excuse was the same tired line: "I was authorized under HOA ordinance." The judge didn't even let him finish before cutting him off. HOA ordinances do not grant you permission to commit theft of services. That's not how the law works. The gavel came down harder than I expected. Clay was ordered to pay me over $50,000 in damages, every stolen kilowatt calculated and multiplied. Enough money to replace my entire system twice over. His Tesla, already half-fried from the surge trap, now sat in his driveway like an expensive paperweight. Karen's reckoning wasn't far behind. After the county finished its audit, she was slapped with fines for mismanagement and forced to resign. The board voted her out, and when the investigation made local headlines, her reputation tanked so badly she sold her house at a loss and moved out of state. And the HOA? Without Karen at the helm, without Clay to scare people, and with county oversight breathing down its neck, it collapsed. The charter was revoked, the bylaws dissolved, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood was free of their grip. Standing on my porch that evening, I watched the sunset wash over the panels on my roof. My system was mine again, secure and untouchable. No flickering lights, no phantom drains, no fake cops lurking in the night. Just clean power flowing where it was meant to. For me, it wasn't just about winning in court or shutting down the HOA. It was about principle. About showing that bullies, even ones who wear vests and hide behind fake authority, can be beaten when you stand your ground and keep receipts. I took a sip of coffee, breathed in the quiet, and thought, Clay wanted power. He just forgot who really owned it. The neighborhood felt different now. Without Clay's midnight prowls and Karen's petty notices littering mailboxes, life actually felt normal again. People started walking dogs without fear of HOA violations, kids played basketball in driveways past sunset, and nobody glanced over their shoulders worrying about citations for leaving trash cans out a few hours too long. For the first time in years, the place felt like home. I still had to wrap up loose ends, though. The civil judgment against Clay wasn't just money on paper. Collections came knocking when he refused to pay. His Tesla, the very car he'd been so proud of, was repossessed and sold off to cover part of the damages. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who stole power lost the very machine he stole it for. Karen's downfall spread even further. Word about her mismanagement of HOA funds made local news, and every prospective community board within 50 miles blacklisted her. The woman who once lorded over our cul-de-sacs with a clipboard now couldn't get herself elected to manage a dog park. As for me, I used part of the settlement money to upgrade my solar system. Higher capacity batteries, a smart inverter, and a security suite that sent instant alerts if anyone even touched the exterior outlets. Not because I was paranoid anymore, but because I could. Neighbors started dropping by with small gestures. Pies, cookies, even just a thank you and a handshake. I realized they weren't just grateful I'd stood up for myself, they were grateful I'd stood up for them, too. Clay and Karen had terrorized everyone, and my fight had given the community the proof and courage they needed. One evening, while working on my garden, Mr. Lopez from across the street came over. He was one of the quieter neighbors, rarely said much beyond a wave. But that night, he smiled and said, "You know, you didn't just save your power. You saved ours too." That hit me harder than the judge's gavel ever could. Justice isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in flashing lights or viral headlines. Sometimes, it's quiet, a peaceful night where no one sneaks onto your property, no fake authority looms over your shoulder, and no one dares to siphon what you've built with your own hands. I sat on my porch with the hum of the solar inverter steady in the background, a sound that had once been twisted into frustration but now felt like victory. My system produced energy, clean, constant, and mine alone. Clay thought he could steal power. In the end, he lost everything because he never understood the truth. Real power belongs to the one who stands their ground, keeps receipts, and refuses to bow to bullies. And as the panels soaked up the last rays of the setting sun, I couldn't help but smile. Because finally, both my grid and my life were running at full power again.